Well, hi everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Chaffee. It's the 27th of March, 2019. And a happy birthday, by the way, to my good buddy Phil Buzz. He's 1 year behind me. So if I'm 60, you can do the math. So I hope you enjoyed your day. All right, so let's take a look at where we're going weather-wise. It's still pretty quiet out there. Across much of the country, the activity, most of the activity is out in the west, in California, in Oregon, and Washington, still getting some rains and heavy mountain snows in the Sierra Nevadas. The rain extends up further north along the coasts. Some of that western energy will be coming eastward over the weekend. And in the east, it's just nice and quiet. We've got blue skies and sunshine, and we had a really nice day, but the sea breeze is causing us a problem. So we're going to take a look at some of the weather maps tonight. Let's bring them up front and center here. And I want to address, before we get to the watches and warnings, one of our regulars posted a comment last night asking about finding the winds on tropical tidbits. And I'm going to show you two places, one on tropical tidbits and one other place to look at. So when you go to tropicaltidbits.com, which we have said many times is our go-to website, what I have pulled up here is the GFS pressure and the 10-meter wind speed in knots. And to get that, you're going to click on Global and go to GFS, which I've already done. And then you're going to go to Lower Dynamics, and you're going to drop down on the menu where it says Mean Sea Level Pressure and 10-meter wind. And click on that. And that will bring up the surface map with the winds on them. And if you have to kind of look closely, you will see the wind barbs here. That is, you're looking at the basic surface winds here. So you have to look at them, look pretty close or have strong enough glasses like I do. But those wind barbs are there. And then, of course, in the colored shadings, it'll tell you the areas of concentration in terms of winds of greater than 20 knots, 24, 28, 32. The scale on the winds is up on the side of the chart. And if you watch the issue with regards to the surface winds here for what's going on now, where we are at Wednesday, our winds during today went into the northeast early on, and they're northeast all the way down into the Carolinas. The high moved offshore. They've been east and now southeast, and this has actually pushed cool ocean air all the way inland. We had some very, very chilly temperatures today, but you can see where the wind barbs are. All those winds are like that. One other place that you could go to is to the NOAA site here, the digital.weather.gov. Now, when the map comes up of the U.S., you go on it tight, and what I do is you go down to map options. All right, you'll see it. Let me make sure you guys can see it over there. Map options on the lower right, and you click on that, and there's a bunch of different boxes to click. Make sure you click on wind barbs, and then move the bar all the way to the 100% range so you get the full range of OBS. I usually will put the satellite base map background here. Let's take the wind barbs off and put them back on. I have the high temperature map for today, the high temperature forecast map for today, and then click on states and colonies. I'm sorry, counties, not colonies. I'm sorry, states and counties option if you'd like, and then you can zoom in as tight or as wide as you want to go. And on the upper left, there's a menu here where you can select all these different options, including wind speed and wind gusts themselves. So you can actually put together a map like this where you've got the sustained winds on the wind barbs, and then the numbers that it'll print will be the gusts. And I just want to jump to Friday because Friday's kind of a tough day in terms of a forecast because we're going to have a weak weather front nearby. Most likely that weather front will lie somewhere just north of Route 84, where you start to see these winds. You know, they're very light southwesterly here. They could very well also be light easterly, but the idea is to get into that southwest wind because that'll at least bring up the warmer air, and I think we're going to get there certainly for Saturday, but the winds are pretty light on Friday with this frontal boundary that's going to be close by, so it's going to make forecasting temperatures just a bit tricky. For my area, which I've got centered here, you can see everybody in eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, all the way down into Maryland, Virginia. I'm going to just move this around a bit, and I'm going to switch to Saturday because Saturday I think is going to be the one really warm day that will take care of most of the area. You can see the 70s here. These are the Weather Service offices in their digital forecasts. So you've got 70s pushing all the way up into the lower Hudson Valley, and mid and upper 60s to the middle and upper Hudson Valley, 60s into southern New Hampshire and Vermont, and then you've got 50s as you move your way up into Maine. So it appears as if this warm air should get pretty far up, and when we move south, just to give you an idea of where it gets relative to the time of year super warm, we're looking at upper 70s to near 80 in parts of southeastern Virginia. You've got 70s all through much of North Carolina, and 70s to near 80 into South Carolina, low 80s down through Georgia. So 70, I think, is going to Saturday is going to be what I would describe as the big day as far as the temperatures are concerned. Right now, though, it's far from it. I'm just pulling up some readings tonight across Long Island, where we've actually seen temperatures drop into the upper 30s, almost close to 37 to me is mid 30s, and these are readings as of 6 o'clock. We're in the 40s inland. It had a really tough time today. Once the temperature got to 50, it came to a grinding halt. Part of it has to do with the fact that we're still in a relatively chilly air mass, but also that wind coming in off the ocean. Temperatures in upstate New York are mostly in the upper 40s to around 50, and we've got 40s clear up into northern New Hampshire and northern Vermont. So the time of year is certainly helps to get those temperatures moving to the upside, even in areas to the north where there is still quite a bit of snow cover. Out in the west, and I said yesterday, I love these West Coast satellites because you can really see these storms look so impressive out here. You've got this low that is sitting off the coast of Oregon. It has not really moved very much at all, feeding that moisture up from the subtropical Pacific and running it northeastward. Looks like that moisture field is beginning to fade a bit. And out further to the west, Hawaii's on the lower left, so go straight north of there, and you can see there's a very wrapped up storm in the north central Pacific. So the whole pattern here in the Pacific, very, very active. Whereas if you look out on the Atlantic side, there isn't a whole lot going on. The full U.S. satellite view shows you all the dry air that we have in the east, a little bit of patchy high clouds that has moved into that moved overhead by me late this afternoon and is now moving through southern New England. There is a bit of a low that's developing off the Florida coast, and those clouds and some rain backing westward toward the east coast of Florida, but nothing too crazy here, and that low is going to eventually shoot out toward the northeast. Here's a surface map tonight. Our high has moved offshore, and now we've got this long fetch of southwest winds with temperatures in the 60s and 70s back through the middle Mississippi Valley, the lower lakes, seeing temperatures well up into the 50s, and you've got 60s and 70s. You get down into Texas, out in the southeast. It's in the this is the 18Z map. Let's see if the 21Z is in. Nope, still at 18Z. So this was at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and readings were in the upper 60s and low 70s and middle 70s. There's your low off the Florida coast, sitting just east of the Bahamas. This is late March, it's not July, so it's not like we're looking at a tropical system. Although, if you look at some of the wind barbs offshore, they are getting sustained winds of 25 and 30 knots. So there are gales probably just offshore, or at least gale force gusts going on with this low that is developing and moving on out to the northeast. And meanwhile, out in the west, there's your storm off the west coast, and that has been sitting there since yesterday. You're getting the occluded front and swinging eastward with the warm front and cold front now into California and into southern Oregon, and they're getting hit with some fairly decent amounts of precip here on the radar. It was a little more active earlier, but we do have another round of heavy rain and mountain snows going on in the Sierra Nevadas. And you can see there's rain up into parts of Oregon, and right along the Oregon-Washington state line back into Idaho, there's this east-west band of rain and some snow that is moving northward. So all of this being swept in by that coastal low. Just a second here. I want to bring up let's bring up the watches and warnings. There are still not a whole lot of watches and warnings happening at the moment. Again, the weather across the country as a whole relatively quiet, except for what's going on in the west. We've got frost warnings up for parts of central South Carolina and coastal North Carolina. The growing season has begun there, so the cool pattern in the east is not something that is welcomed once the growing season starts. We have a round of winter storm watches up for parts of Wyoming. Also some winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories in parts of southwest Montana and northeastern Idaho. There's a lot of flood advisories still up there for river flooding, and that extends throughout much of the plains and into the Midwest. And we've got winter storm warnings up for the Sierra Nevadas and high wind warnings up for some of the counties in Nevada. Also, wind advisories. And also some wind advisories in parts of eastern Kansas. A little bit of a red flag warning issued for part of the Florida Panhandle there. And when we look at what's going on off the Florida coast, we actually have a slew of marine warnings that are up at the moment. This is as of 6:12 Eastern time, so I'm just going to go back to the radar, and we'll move it to that part of the world. Let's bring it there. And yeah, there's the rotation around the low that is offshore, and you're getting this band of rain and thunderstorms just off the coast. Looks like they're just offshore. Probably some decent lightning shows being visible from the folks that are on the Florida coast here, the Florida East Coast, watching that precip offshore. That's going to start to move away in time. As far as severe weather is concerned, there's not too much happening from that view. This is the severe weather risk for tonight. There is a small area of marginal risk in western Kansas and northern Texas. 3 areas of thunderstorms outlined there in the plains and into the Midwest. Actually 5. Just missed the 2 small ones. An area of thunderstorms possible in eastern Florida, a small portion of southwest Texas, and then in the west with that storm coming in offshore. The Storm Prediction Center not doing anything with severe weather risk for tomorrow, but for Friday, and they've been advertising this on their day 4 to 8 time frame for the last couple of days. They do have a slight risk of severe being introduced in Oklahoma, in eastern Oklahoma, inside an area of marginal risk, and of course the larger area of general thunderstorm activity. The overall setup from what we discussed yesterday really hasn't changed too much in my view. When we look at the upper air, you've got this trough that's off the Florida coast, and that's your low that is offshore near the Bahamas. You can see that just gets kind of kicked out to the east. You get this ridging that develops in the east. Here's your short wave that is going to be swinging around for for Sunday. That's going to bring a cold front to the coast. Now, the energy in the Pacific, let's just roll back here. The energy from the Pacific is rolling inland, and some of it comes eastward, hooks up with that trough in the east, and that brings a cold front through here. GFS is now pushed back the arrival time of the front to later in the day on Sunday. Kind of suspected we were going to go in this direction. So Sunday looks like will be not, certainly Saturday will be the better of the 2 weekend days. That pulls out, so we get a chilly shot of air. There's more energy from the west that the models have been showing here for the middle part of next week. And so far, we're only out to about 144 hours on the new GFS, which is for Tuesday afternoon. The European has been trying to make a low out of this and just kind of doing what it's done with the other ones in this position, and that is shoot it out pretty much straight to the east. It did lift it up a little further north today, but nowhere near the coast, and GFS has been more aggressive with it. I think the only way it lifts up is if there's some kind of shortwave in that northern stream that comes in and maybe not a complete phase, but enough to just try to lift it up along the east coast. The late afternoon run may be going a bit more of the squashed look. So let's see. Here's the current surface map, and there's your low off the Florida coast. Moving out, we've got this big high sitting offshore. Now there's a backdoor front that moves into the east for Friday, gets hung up, weakens, and then backs up as a warm front. Meanwhile, let's just run back just to show you what happens in the west with everything coming inland there. So you've got some energy here that starts to jump eastward for Friday into Saturday, and this is your system that's going to set up for Sunday. With that first wave coming out, the backdoor front comes to a grinding halt, starts to pop back up as a warm front. You've got a west-southwest flow here for Saturday, so this is why I think a lot of areas are going to see temperatures at 70 or better. If we get a decent amount of sun, there could be some upside here in terms of temperatures. That first wave goes by, you get a second wave that develops, and that comes through Sunday morning. Now you start to bring the precip from the front to the coast. I know Chuck Cardillo happened to just notice that all that blue up in upstate New York, and whether he's going to see a little bit of snow out of this in the Catskills. I don't know. You know, you might get it at the very end, but it does shut off rather quickly. We don't have a well-developed system here at all. It's just basically a flat wave. So you've had enough snow, Chuck. So we'll bring that front through, and the bottom part of that front, a little wave develops here. The new GFS, you can see the surface low. It's still trying to lift this up. This is by late Tuesday. I still, my suspicion is that it may get so far north before it gets kicked to the east, unless there's something in that northern stream. Certainly this run is a 998 low there, so there'll be some, if this was right, there'll be some gales. I'll have to look at this a bit closer. I've been really kind of favoring the idea that the system is going to be squashed, much like what we're seeing with the one tonight that's off the Florida coast. There's more energy that continues to come into the west as we head into next week, so that's going to mean for more rain and snow there. The overall pattern continues to at least try to get to a point where we're talking about more troughing in the west and a bit more ridging in the east after the first part of next week. We'll back this up, and you can watch the upper air in terms of how it's what's going on here in the eastern part of the United States. So this is today. Here we go. That's today, Wednesday. So out that goes. The flow here, you've got a flow of chilly Canadian air, but the jet in Canada is pulled a bit too far to the north. The trough rotates around. Here we go for Sunday. Then that lifts out. You've got that southern energy, that Pacific energy that moves along in the southern stream. And I'm going to go back one run now. This is where the dayside run has this sort of wrapped up upper low that it takes off the Carolina coast and shoots it out to the northeast. I would favor the idea that this would go offshore. And then if you look at the flow basically across the United States, it's kind of west to east. You've got deep cutoffs in the Gulf of Alaska and off the west coast. You've got a little bit of flow coming out of Canada with some short waves in the northern stream, but the coldest air is pulled way up to the north. So we're going to see, I think, a warmer trend in the longer haul overall. It's not going to be, every day, obviously, but I think you're going to have more days where temperatures are going to be above average than below average as we move through the first part of the month of April. At least that's the way, I'm looking at it. The other thing to start looking to is we're getting to that time of year also as that northern jet pulls northward. It does tend to want to leave energy behind, and that energy winds up cutting off. When we talk about cutoffs here, when you get these wrapped up upper lows, like you see this one here, this is out 16 days from now. I just want to use this for just to illustrate. You start to see more and more of these upper lows that basically separate themselves from the strongest part of the jet stream, and they cut off. And sometimes what happens in the spring is you can get these cutoffs, and depending on where you are in the scheme of things, you can get these cutoff lows where they just sit for days and days and days. Now, if you're in a situation where if you see this, say this cutoff that's in West Virginia, and then you've got this cutoff that's way out in the Atlantic, there's an upper high in between. Now, if you just picture that sitting over the United States, if you're sitting in the position of that upper high, you've got great weather for days and days. If you're positioned anywhere near those upper lows, you've got miserable weather for days and days and days. And that is the story, of how the spring works and how April works. And where did I go? Did I disappear here? Oh my. Or did I stare? I'm in the tiny little box. Hang on. I'm going to make myself a little bit larger. So the time of year where you get these cutoff lows, it can be particularly frustrating in the Northeast and into the Mid-Atlantic states, because I can remember instances in the springtime where you're basically sitting in clouds for 4, 5, or 6 days at a time, and that's miserable. And you're in these raw conditions, northeast winds, temperatures not out of the 40s, damp, light rain and drizzle. Every once in a while you get lucky and the sky brightens up and you see a break or two of sun, and that's about the extent of the nice weather going forward. So we're going to start watching for these cutoff lows that are going to start to pop up here and there, and how they're going to impact the weather. Alfred Phillips has gone to just one shy of the freezing mark in Wainwright, Alaska. I'm so used to seeing you with the minus sign in front of those numbers, Alfred, that it's refreshing to see that you have just risen above the freezing mark. And of course, now your days are lengthening very rapidly there up on the north coast. You're soon going to be, before too long, you're going to be in the land of the midnight sun, 24 hours of daylight. Robert Brown, Chuck, good to see you here. Chuck Cardillo, Scott Briller, Joseph Mayano. Cutoff lows are hard to predict. Oh yeah, they're a religious experience, especially when you get into these weak flows later in the spring, and they just tend to meander around. We're having a warm March in the UK. David Allen, nice to see you here. Average temperature 4 degrees Fahrenheit above average so far. Could you take a look and see if winter is coming back? All right, I can do that. Hang on one second here. And I haven't really looked at the weather across the pond lately, but I will be more than happy to do that for you. So let's bring up the map of Europe. And you've got this, well, I'm already jumping 16 days from now, where you've got this big upper high in northwestern Europe. But let's see what's going on right now. A lot of southern Europe and a lot of southern Europe in a ridge position here. And you've got another big upper high building into Ireland and England. That spells more warm weather. Actually, I'm sorry. Let me just check the date here. That was from earlier this week. So this is what you're getting now. It's got this big upper high that is sitting south of Ireland and England. You're still in a ridge position going into Friday. And then a bit of a shortwave trough goes by to your north. Ridge comes. It's amazing. The ridge keeps wanting to come right back. There's an upper high sitting offshore to your west that kind of noses in out to about day 6 or 7. So we're into the middle part of next week. Judging from this, I don't see any winter weather coming back anytime, or late winter weather. We should clarify. So let's run the surface map here for you. Looks pretty dry until we get to some showers Friday night into Saturday into Scotland. Then that high comes in, and now we're into next week. Low pressure goes by north of Scotland. Nothing too crazy. It's not a major gale. And I guess when we get to, days 8 and 9, because there's more troughing coming in, if that holds together, that looks like a shot of fairly chilly air coming into England and Ireland. Even showing some snows here. Now we're into April 5th, showing some snows in northern Ireland and the northern and in Scotland and northernmost England around day 9 and 10. I'll have to look at some prior runs to see if this is something new. You know how models like to roll things around, but that would be, we're talking here now. There's a wrapped up gale between Scotland but closer to Iceland a week from now. And it gets pretty deep there, 959 low, although the really tight gradient is further north, but there's colder air that comes down from Greenland behind it. So we're talking a week from today and beyond, David, where there's, the models are at least hinting. But again, I'm just giving it kind of a cursory view. I didn't get a chance to look at things fairly deep. I don't know if anyone's been talking about that up where in England. Beryl Reagan, we're staying this winter in Central Park much below average. We're saying, well, snow-wise, it wasn't that far below average, depending on which average you use. So if you use the long-term average of about 30, we had a little over 20, so that was 2/3 of normal. If you use the 30-year average, it's a little over 25, so you wound up with about 80% of normal. Metal Mastodon, I believe 2015-16 still finished above normal snowfall for most areas, even though it seemed tame compared to the winters we've been having. It seemed tame compared to the winters we've been having more times than not. If that's the El Nino year, if you're referring to the areas surrounding New York City, as long as you don't go too far north or too far south, the answer is it did finish above normal snowfall that particular winter. But even down to Washington, D.C., Baltimore, because they got the big snow, they got that big snow from the January 16th snowstorm. So, yeah, for much of the areas. But once you go up not too far north of New York City, north of Route 84, northward, the snowfalls that winter, I believe, if I remember correctly, were below normal, and in some cases well below normal. And yeah, the winter was quote-unquote underwhelming in the coastal areas from Portland, Maine, down to about Philadelphia in the I-95 corridor. But it wasn't that. It wasn't underwhelming. If you go 75 to 100 miles north and west of there, it was normal to above average, depending on, some places a little above, some places a little bit more above, some places a little bit below, but kind of coming into line, I guess, for a more typical winter. So as far as the I-95 corridor is concerned, a subpar winter was in the cards sooner or later. They can't all be above par. Timothy Veltman, storm chasers are really going to be under scrutiny now. I guess somebody filed a lawsuit against the Weather Channel. I'll have to look and see what that story is about. I haven't seen anything on it, but actually that's the first I've seen on it, Timothy, so I'll check it out once we're done. T-Bear, nice to see you here. Appreciate it. Ray C., Michael Piero, Latex Dreams. This is such an odd name. I'm sorry. Javon Perry, Dionan Kumar. I did see Mahogany on. Nice to see you on board tonight. And G-Train on tonight. Let's see, I don't see Chris Alley. I guess my buddy Chris Alley took the night off. Robert Brown. William Uber's on. I'm going to try a little fishing on Saturday, Bill. If we can get the temperatures on the island to get at least into the upper 50s, I might try it. Javon Perry, nice to see you. Beryl Rakin, as I said before, good to see you. Johnny Quest, and the whole gang is here tonight. Nice to see everybody. All right, I guess we'll wrap it up over here. Keeping the live streams a little bit shorter when the weather isn't doing very much, and it's still helping me to kind of mentally wind down. I'm sorry, Javon. You know, I try to get everybody in there, and I know I miss people on a nightly basis. Phil P., Joseph Tufano, nice to see you. So if I do miss you, I will get you eventually. Chris Tamarine? I hope I got that right. Northwestern Ohio has had very much a below average snowfall this winter. Seems like each winter it snows less and less. Yes, but remember that when you string 4 or 5 of those in a row, eventually you're going to wind up with one that makes up for those 5. So just as I said that my area was due for a subpar year, your area may be due for a one of these winters may be due for a super duper year. It all evens out in the last analysis. If you look at a lot of the snow records in a number of the cities that run in that range between, say, I don't know, 35 degrees north to about 45 degrees north, right in there, maybe a little bit, maybe more like 42 degrees north. So let's say 42 degrees north down to about 38 degrees north. That 4 degree spread there, about 240 miles or so. You'll find that a lot of the records in that zone, especially as you get closer to the East Coast, a lot of the records in that zone, you have a lot of subpar years, and then you'll have 1 or 2 big gangbuster years that make up for the subpar years. So you're just going to have one of these years. It's going to happen. Okay, your long range, your long-term average is a given number. So if you've got a bunch of winters where you're running, 2/3 of normal or 50% below normal, over the long haul, you got to make it up on the other side, because the average number didn't just magically appear. It's based on past statistics, and assuming that everything is operating in similar fashion, that there hasn't been any kind of radical change in the overall climate pattern. You will make it up at some point. I just know that as a snow lover that's lived through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, when you've got 30 years and 24 of them are subpar, that you start to wonder. And then the last, as I've said many times, if you're in the coastal, the I-95 corridor, particularly from north of Philadelphia to Boston, the last 20 years has been an absolute gangbusters period as far as snow is concerned. All right, let's leave it at that. No more snow talk. It's almost the end of March. I've got, by the way, if you want to check it out, I do have a post about it. I did talk a little bit about what I think the upper pattern is going to be going into the month of April. You can check that out by going to my website, meteorologistjoechaffee.com. Of course, if you're on my Patreon platform, you already have that. So you can take a look at it if you haven't seen the post from earlier today. For those of you who are interested in a more extended weather experience, I would strongly suggest that you consider joining my Patreon platform, which is a subscription platform. Just $2 a month is all it costs, and you get a lot of extra weather coverage, including live streams, extra posts. You can message me at any time. I usually get back to you in a timely fashion. The link is on the chat. It's also on the descriptor to this live stream. If you're watching this replay, the descriptor to this video. So do consider it. It's just $2 a month, and it does come in handy during storms. I put a lot of stuff up there. Scott, I've been meaning to add some more instructional videos, which are on my YouTube channel, by the way. I did a few over the last 4 or 5 weeks. Now that we're into a time where the weather is slow, I will be adding some instructional videos. Usually what happens with me is that I know I have to do these things, and then I just kind of put it off, and then one day I'll just sit in front of my computer and just do one after another. So I promise you over the next week or two I'll throw a couple of new ones on there. Good, Bill. Take advantage while the weather is nice, particularly if you have a day on Long Island that there's no ocean wind or a minimal sea breeze, so you don't freeze while you're out there. Definitely take advantage of it on Saturday, because I think it should at least get into the 50s as you go east, and areas to the west will probably make it up into the 60s. By the way, one other way you can support my channel, for those of you who shop on Amazon, I do have an Amazon link that you can use, and you don't have to buy what's on the link. You can go ahead and just use the search bar and shop and look for whatever it is you want. We're a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for us to earn fees by linking to Amazon.com and its affiliated sites. You shop, you get your stuff, doesn't cost you an extra dime, and Amazon throws me back a little bit of coin. I get a few cigars and maybe a few fishing lures out of it, and everybody is happy. All right, everyone have a great night, and we will see you tomorrow. I think we'll be doing a Joe and Joe weather show on Facebook tonight at 9:25. I believe Joe is much better tonight. He's been in, but he's just been not feeling well with whatever bug is running around these days. But he seems to be a lot better today, so I think we'll probably take a shot at it tonight at 9:25 on Facebook. Good night, everyone.